Madam Speaker, today we will consider a short-term continuing resolution that will allow the essential functions of our government to continue beyond March 4th, the date on which the current continuing resolution will expire. With no final agreement on the spending levels for the current fiscal year, this measure is necessary in order to avoid a government shutdown, something I believe we should all want to do. I think that 2 weeks is not enough time to reach an agreement on H.R. 1 with the other body. And I'm afraid we're going to be back here doing this again. Now, when the House approved H.R. 1 earlier this month, despite the overwhelming opposition of the Democratic caucus, it was clear to me that gaining agreement on a compromised version of a full-year continuing resolution would be very difficult, at least before the expiration of the current CR. We opposed H.R. 1 because we believe it would have the effect of slamming on the fiscal brakes too abruptly, resulting in higher unemployment and threatening our nation's economic recovery. There is no dispute that cutting federal spending too deeply and too quickly before the economy has fully recovered risks slowing growth, losing jobs. Moody's estimates that H.R. 1 would reduce real growth in 2011 by 0.5%, meaning 400,000 fewer jobs in 2011 and 700,000 fewer jobs by the end of 2012. The Economic Policy Institute projected job losses near 800,000. Goldman Sachs predicts that H.R. 1 would slow economic growth by about between 1.5 and 2 percentage points, which translates into the American economy losing up to 2.4 million jobs. So the recovery of our economy and the reduction of unemployment should be our paramount concern at this time. I said that during the debate on H.R. 1 earlier this month, and I will repeat today, that I believe the approach to deficit reduction that has been adopted by the Republican majority here in the House is far too narrow and too focused on the smallest segment of spending in the budget. It is a risky strategy based on the specious concept of cut and grow, which of course has no basis in sound economic theory. So where does this leave us? We are now 6 months into the current fiscal year, FY11, and hearings with regard to the fiscal year 2012 budget have begun in both the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee. H.R. 1 is clearly not acceptable to the other body, nor would it be acceptable to the President, whose signature is necessary before any funding bill can become law. What the President has already proposed for the coming year, a budget freeze at last year's level, remains, in my judgment, the best and most effective way to reduce the deficit and to support recovery in major sectors of our economy. And in fact, we have already adopted a freeze at FY10 levels in the continuing resolution that we are currently operating under. Democrats approved CR in December with only one Republican vote, which represents a reduction, now I want you all to listen to this, of $41 billion from the level sought by the President in his FY 2011 budget request. A significant reduction in the deficit, and a significant part of that came from defense. I want to repeat this. The $41 billion cut from the Obama FY11 budget was passed in a CR by the Democratic House and Democratic Senate and signed into law by the Democratic President with only one Republican vote. We are now on the verge of an expiring CR, and we are considering another version that extends the time to resolve the differences by only 2 weeks. I take the chairman at his word that neither he nor the leadership is interested in shutting down the operation of the federal government by declaring a statement in these appropriations deliberations. I will concede that it is disconcerting to me and others on our side to read the Speaker's comments this week that would seem to imply that there is a strategy of passing shorter-term appropriation bills further and further and further cuts, 2 weeks at a time. We were concerned by his statement that seemed to indicate a plan for a piecemeal approach to future spending cuts. He said, and I quote, "If they won't eat the whole loaf at one time, we'll make them eat it one slice at a time." I believe we need to set aside these political machinations and get serious about finishing up work on the fiscal year 2011 budget. And I will be the first to admit that it's because the Democrats didn't pass our bills last year, that we're here working on this. So we have responsibility, and that's one of the reasons why we were so eager to engage Chairman Rogers in trying to get this open rule, work through the amendments, get a continuing resolution, a unanimous consent agreement, and to help move this process, because I personally feel we have some responsibility here. And I think it is obvious that we are going to need more than, as I said, I'll say this as I started, I'll say it again, the 2 weeks to get from here to there. Now, I appreciate the desire of the gentleman from Kentucky to encourage the members of his caucus to enter into serious negotiations with the other body, with the hope of completing work by March 18th. But in a conference, I've been in conferences for 34 years, and 8 years before that as a staffer. Nobody gets everything they want. It's a process of compromise. You work out the differences between the two positions. But I'm proud of the fact that we start with a cut of $41 billion that was enacted by the Democratic Congress in December, a very successful lame duck session. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky.
Yield myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
The gentleman who's my friend